Right. Morning, morning. Welcome, everybody. Lee, is it IQ or EQ or AI or maybe WI this morning? I'm not too sure. So we'll have to try and see if we've got the intelligence to work all of those things out. But yeah, you better kick us off and see so you can tell us what it's all about.
Morning, everyone. So thank you to Nozipo for highlighting this topic of different kinds of intelligences. And it's actually, it's wonderful that we have this perspective that there isn't just one kind of intelligence, a kind of mental intelligence that used to be measured by IQ. And we now know that these IQ tests were incredibly biased and all the rest of it. And so realizing that we're much more multifunctional and multi-dimensional than in one particular way. I am going to highlight an intelligence that means the most to me, and I leave it to everyone else to decide which direction they want to go in terms of highlighting a range or a specific kind of intelligence. But when I first started my business 17 years ago, the very first course that I designed and ran and still continue to run today, which shows to me it was never, because even at the time it was said to be a fad or, you know, a new jargon. But it remains consistent today, and that is emotional intelligence. And I think it's been fascinating for me to acknowledge the intelligence of our emotions, that our emotions are not just something we have to tolerate or dampen or you know, they are there for a reason, and that they're indicating something, that they're a signal system that we have to pay attention to, and that they inform our decisions. And I always think about how do you order something off the menu when you're in a restaurant? How do you make the decision as to what you're going to order? And there's logical reasons about price and about, you know, whether you have got allergies or your personality. And then you'll also it'll boil down to maybe 3 or 4 options. And then it'll be a case of, what do I feel like? You know, am I adventurous tonight? Or do I feel like something, you know? And so your emotions are important in making decisions. And then the last thing I want to say about emotional intelligence is, what do we mean by it? What is it? I'm not going to go into a whole long treatise on it, but just the aspects of it, and being self-awareness. And we spoke about that yesterday, of being able to step back from ourselves, just that little bit, to be able to observe our own thinking. And with emotional intelligence, it's my own emotions. Why am I reacting this way? So that's self-awareness, the self-management, that given what I'm aware, that I'm able to then make decisions that don't get me fired, basically. So whether that's fired from a relationship or from a job, that my immediate reaction doesn't come from the base of my skull, my lizard brain, but I've been able to process enough to be able to make some decisions that work hopefully in my favor. Delayed gratification, that I'm able to hold back on what I need and want now for a greater goal later on. And then empathy, that I can see enough of something from somebody else's point of view that I don't have to constantly allow my ego to take front and center. So those are the aspects of emotional intelligence that I wanted just to highlight as one of many intelligences. And I'd like to hear what kind of intelligences you know or are important to you, and tell us a bit about them.
Great, thanks, Lee. I'm not sure about all these intelligences. I'm wondering whether I was going to get fired, but then I was getting hungry because of all the discussions about menus. And then I saw Trevor Carty eating his breakfast over the Golden Gate Bridge. And then I really thought, well, where do we go from here? I don't know if that's intelligence or distraction or the inability to focus. But yeah, I suppose it all comes into the picture one way or another, doesn't it? So I think, Trevor, we have to go to you first. That's Trevor Carty.
Yeah, morning. It's nothing like eating breakfast on a bridge, as opposed to thinking of jumping off the bridge. So these intelligences. This morning I was thinking about the CI, the central intelligence, and what a interesting space we've been built around this thing called the CIA. And yet, what's really of significance to me nowadays is the PI, my physical intelligence. So I think since I got into my 50s, I've been looking at what are the real challenges, and by this time of your life, you tend to have worked out what your emotional intelligences are and what some of the other intelligences are, but you seem to have left your PI behind, and yet it's going to really determine what's your duration, what's your staying power. So if you've got any intelligence at all, and clearly it's taken me far too long to get you, I think PI is probably the most significant intelligence, and yet no one ever talks about physical intelligence. So Lee, it goes right up there. Anytime you want to have just one on physicality and your body, I think Wisdoms needs to help us get around this being younger next year. How do we do it? So yeah, morning all.
Great, thanks, Trevor. Yeah, it's an interesting PI, Magnum PI. Yeah, Trevor. Yeah, we got problems with these Trevors. I tell you what, they're taking us in all sorts of strange directions this morning. But I see Jasper's on the roll this morning, so we're going to have to go to you next, Jasper. You're going to have to explain all those different things you put in the chat box there.
Morning, everybody. I actually put it there. I quickly looked it up on Google, and I put it there in the hope that having put it there, someone will pick on something and explain it to us.
That's called GI, Jasper. So it's GI intelligence. So we call you GI Joe from now.
Google intelligence. So just looking at the very first two, interpersonal versus intrapersonal. I thought by putting it up there, I will be able to just quickly catch and connect with it and sound very clever. But so interpersonal, it's probably then this thing that I wrestle within myself and how good do I feel about myself? And if I feel good about myself, I can probably interact better with other people. Intrapersonal, I think that's fairly obvious. How do I relate with other people? And that would maybe be called people skills or social intelligence. Kinesthetic, that would be your touchy-feely stuff. So how good are you in distinguishing textures? And I think like these people who are wine tasters and food connoisseurs, that they can actually taste the ingredients in stuff. That's probably what he talks about there. Linguistic, verbal intelligence. That's your ability to express yourself. Mathematical, that would be people understanding mathematics. Musical, that's probably not just people who, well, I don't know. Is it people who just listen to who can actually play music and master music fast? Or is it just people who can also hear and appreciate music? I don't know what naturalistic is. Is it what liking to lie in the sun naked, or is it loving nature? Then visual, spatial. That's probably your architects. And then I'll leave all the rest over to Trevor to explain to us what's business intelligence.
Thanks, Jasper. Yeah, look, now I think we're all totally confused, but We'll just have to see where this one takes us. So I think we're going to have to go across to Stella next. So Stella, over to you.
Morning, everyone. So I just want to set the record straight after yesterday when I said, when I was an accountant, I didn't think so much, but I meant, I'm sure if I didn't think, I wouldn't have lasted over 20 years. But I think what I meant was when I didn't used to really have time to reflect and to think about what happened during the day and to reflect on my emotions. I think now I'm more in touch of thinking about, but okay, thinking was yesterday. So today we're talking about intelligence. So I think while I was thinking about the subject, I thought, you know, people are so quick to think that intelligent people is people with a degree or master's or doctor's degree or CA or a doctor or psychologist. Those are the only intelligent people. But I think for me, I was more thinking about on the personal level of bias against people that you might think is not intelligent. And I was thinking about my brother. So I've got a degree, a few degrees. My brother never studied at a university, but he is some, and don't ask me what's the word, some or other auto electrician, but there's another word in front of him, in front of it, that's very specialized. And he's so intelligent in what he's doing practically. He had to obviously it's qualification that he had to do practical, and now he's working overseas and he's in such a great demand for his work because there's not a lot of people that's got that skill and intelligence in my word, in you know, in the right sense of thinking. So I was just more thinking about that one must be very cautious in not labeling people as intelligent or not intelligent based on their qualifications. That's me for today. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Stella. Yeah, and that brings me back to that little documentary that we spoke about the other day on Netflix, My Octopus Teacher. If you want to see some real intelligence, go and look at the octopus. I think it shows some real interesting insights into other forms of intelligence, as it were. So, all right, Samantha, let's come across to you next. Welcome back. We haven't seen you for a while.
Hello. Yes. Morning, everybody. I was so busy on the chat now that that's where I was focused. I was just saying kind of the reflexive and reflective nature of intelligence is also important. It's not well, I don't think intelligence is a static thing. It's not, you can't measure it at a point in time and that's what it is. There's a lot of evolution around intelligence. It's about growth. It's about increased awareness. And that is just unlinked to formal qualifications and educations and so on and so forth. I think to Steve's point, it's the dynamic state of intelligence, and I'm missing that in these discussions. Sorry, my CEO is very verbal this morning. So yeah, that's my thing. And also I was typing now, I've called it contextual intelligence because I've just made that up. I don't know if there is a word or space for it, but there's also an intelligence related in terms of how you behave, how you act, and how you think within different contexts. Almost like choosing your battles, knowing when it's important to make your point, have your opinions, where it's better to, because not everybody's in the same space in terms of that reflexiveness. So having that contextual intelligence, I call it, but I don't know what you would call it. So it's a bit of a social consciousness, understanding how to navigate spaces is also a part of intelligence. That's my 25 cents.
Super, thank you. Yeah, and appreciate the dog's input as well. Right, yeah, Trevor understood that totally. I don't think anybody else did, but I mean the dog, that is. So we'll have to find out what he reckons it said a little bit later. But Donovan, let's get across to you next.
Morning, everyone. Yes, I put a comment about artificial intelligence, and how that can influence our intelligence. Basing it on when we look at Google, the impact it has on us. People who are not well read, but Google literate, tend to display some intelligence in terms of how the world functions, how we operate, how we deal with issues of life. So that also brings in a certain aspect of intelligence based on artificial intelligence. Thank you.
Thanks, Donovan. Yeah, that raises an interesting question in our mind. So is somebody who's getting their information that they're spouting as apparent intelligence from Google, is that artificial intelligence on their part, or is it just acquired? I'm not too sure. So it could be AI in either direction, acquired intelligence or artificial intelligence, or simply accessed intelligence. I don't know, but yeah, we can turn AI into lots of different things, I think. So that's an interesting way to look at perceived facts that appear to have been gained from a third-party source that you may not have verified. So yeah, another discussion that we could perhaps go down at some point in time. So Ed, let's see if your sound has sorted itself out, and if we can understand you this morning with your undersea accent. No, unfortunately not, Ed. Yeah, no, we're not getting you, Ed, I'm afraid. That's unfortunate, but the sound is just not with us this morning. So Una, let's come across to you next.
Yeah, sure. I was worried that you're going to come to me. I feel all muddled up and like I don't have anything intelligent to contribute. I think it's just such a wide topic to talk about. Maybe what I can just say is that I think that in the school system, and I think in the world, we maybe not aware enough of the different types of intelligences. I think the school system, as we all know, is very geared towards a very specific way of thinking and doing. And if you don't fit into that paradigm, then you sort of get the impression that you're not intelligent. And as we mature and go through life, we sometimes realize there's other things that determines your success in life and your intelligence, and it's not always the things that's obvious. It's sometimes the things that's subtle, just in terms of how you approach the world and the decisions you make, and which will go into wisdom again. So thank you.
Thanks, Una. Right, Cecile, I'm not sure if you are with us, or are you still busy multitasking?
No, I'm here. No video. When I joined Mensa many years ago, and it showed that I was good at languages and stuff like that, you feel kind of okay. But then I feel so doff when you meet people that are really good at mathematics and those kind of mathematical things. Then you think, oh my word, am I this one-dimensional that I'm only good at like really one thing? But the other thing that always fascinates me is the human brain. When it comes to, you can hear a sound of the beginning notes of a song. You can hear a split second of it, and your brain will know exactly what song it is of the billions of songs that you've heard in your life. And the brain will make that connection, which to me is absolutely fascinating. Even when we are in this age where we forget a lot of things, your brain won't forget those notes of the songs that you knew when you were a youngster. And yeah, so that fascinates me. And then sometimes some of the radio stations also have those competitions where they just play a split second of of something, a sound of something, and you can know immediately what it is. So the brain is absolutely fantastic when it comes to that. And then just like, I think, like Stella said, practical people are also they fascinate me. My son-in-law, you can give him anything and he can reproduce anything. He's just so good with practical things and making the best out of practical things, and he's not educated in that way, in a formal education in that way at all. But you can give him whatever you want to give him and he will just do it. So yeah, so those are the things that fascinate me about intelligence and different kinds of intelligence.
Great, thanks, Cecile. Right, I think we need to go across to the O in the middle of the dough. And that, so that would be you, Trevor, seeing that you put yourself in that position.
I told you all yesterday that I hardly have anything to contribute on this subject. So I'm sitting and listening. I'm just fascinated by all the intelligent people here. And to answer, I think it was Jasper's question, business intelligence. I asked the question, is that an oxymoron? Because I haven't seen too many intelligent people in business. So that's my simple contribution. I'm just loving listening to what people have got to say. Cheers, everybody.
All right, thanks, Trevor. Short and sweet for some reason. I'm not too sure. Maybe that had something to do with the donut, but yeah, we'll have to not go around in those circles, I don't think. But so, Mpumalelo, let's come across to you next.
Good morning again, everyone. Interestingly, Cecile, when we lose our cognitive ability, music is the last thing to leave your mind. So when you were just talking about music, it made me think of that. 3 thoughts, and I'm going to try pull a Donovan today because I'm also learning from wisdoms, you know. 3 thoughts I had. The first one was that, interestingly, in VANAC, there's no differentiation of intelligence when it comes to cognitive ability and action. We use the same word. So if you act in a wise way, it's the same word as when you think in a wise way. So in VANAC, you don't separate the two. Your actions and what you say put together will then equals to intelligence or wisdom. So that was interesting for me, which is a little bit different from a Eurocentric perspective of intelligence. That's the first thought. Second thought, what came to my mind was, or I looked mostly at the linguistic intelligence, which has to do with finding the right words to say what you mean. And that was interesting for me. What it made me think of was what I would call a principle of be quick to hear, but be slow to speak, meaning take time to think about what you're going to say so that you say what you mean, and you say it in a way that it comes across as perfectly as you possibly could. And that was very interesting for me. But over and above that, having looked at all these different intelligences, I think at some point they are interconnected. Yes, one may weigh more than the other because of how a person has developed, but chances are they interact or work together in some way. So those were some of the interesting thoughts I had. But the biggest one was be quick to hear, but be slow to speak.
Great, thanks, Mpumalelo. Right, Nazipo, let's come across and hear your thoughts.
Great, thanks. Hello, everyone. You know, I think in my walks in life, or with the people that I've met, whether the people I work with or the people I come into contact with, I've come to realize that academic intelligence, for example, does not necessarily translate to success. I've come across people in my academia walk. I've met people, like very intelligent people, as intelligent as professors, and they're intelligent academically, But if you take them outside academia, you take them outside institutions into the streets, you find them wanting. And, you know, it always bothers me, and I always ask myself why, but I've come to realize that, I mean, there's sometimes, I mean, there was one colleague of mine, very intelligent, brilliant, like brilliant. Those people that you would go to and ask anything out of, and, you know, they'd give you the answer right then. But, you know, when you look at their life outside work or academia, then you see people to steer his life.
Well, Nazipa, I'm afraid you're breaking up quite badly on us. So you did mention you were having some challenges, and I think they've reappeared on you.
Relational or things that appear. Am I still breaking?
You've come back now. Let's see if you can carry on going.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, carry on. Yes, no. I think we've lost her.
It's become a case of my. Is it cutting still?
It's sort of coming in and out, unfortunately.
Well, I'm not quite sure. It must be something with my Wi-Fi, because my bars are on high, are on full.
Okay, Karen, now you came back there, so we got you.
My biggest question.
No, okay. Unfortunately, we seem to have lost Nazipa there. Yeah, Nazipa, I'm afraid we're not. You're not coming through now, even with your video off. So it's a bit of a challenge. Pity about that. We really like to pick up where you're heading with that, because there's some interesting elements. Perhaps you can type some of them into the chat box for us. So Steve, let's come across to you.
I was just thinking about Trevor's comments about business intelligence being oxymoronic, and it made me think of common sense as not so common, and reminded me of a quote from Winston Churchill. He says, the biggest thing to put you off the concept of democracy would be a 5-minute conversation with the average voter, in terms of how prevalent common sense is at the level of most of society. Yeah, intelligence is so fascinating for me, because I think specifically for the last 150 or so, a little bit longer years of human history, we have privileged certain kinds of intelligence over others. And I've seen a lot of that in the schooling systems when I've worked with young people. And so my responsibility was around the implicit or the hidden curriculum side, which is more the EQ side, the interpersonal, the intrapersonal, the group dynamic, leadership, character, etc. And you can see just how quickly the sort of more mathematical, more logical, more rational side of thinking and intelligence is privileged when you move into that space. Because I think some of what Nazipa was talking about there is people who are sort of innately intelligent in that way will often battle in some of the other intelligences. And so for me, there's a great need to level out some of the playing fields, and just to help young people in their development, and then adults as well, that we pay attention to the number of different ways of being intelligent, and that we don't privilege one over the other. And I think you see that a lot, not just in the individual, but in groups, because if you get a diverse group, then you'll start to see the manifestation of these different intelligences. And a really productive group for me can leverage all the different kinds of intelligences towards a successful decision or task, etc. So just for interest's sake, so when we used to do a lot of work out in the bush, we worked in outdoor campuses, and the boys and girls who had the innate sort of musical intelligence were often a lot better at some of the survival bushcraft things that we did than some of the more left brain, rational, intelligent kind of students. And even then, those sort of typical jock, sporty type students, because they had a sensitivity and an ear to what was going on around them. And they would pick up things that the other students didn't. And it was through their sensitivity that had been trained through both the innate musical ability and then the ways in which they'd polished that, And they'd pick up bird calls, they'd pick up changes in the environment that some of the others wouldn't pick up on. And so I like to see a more holistic approach to intelligence. I think people definitely have innate ways of looking at things and of thinking and of being intelligent, but you can learn some of the others and they can be polished. They might not be your preference or your first choice, but you can become a little bit more rounded without losing your areas of specialization. So yeah, that's just a couple of brief thoughts.
Great, thanks, Steve. Yeah, I think it is fascinating when you change an environment. You know, different skill sets and different abilities to operate within that environment then emerge. And I think what sounds like what you were doing is fascinating. Really, really interesting. And I couldn't agree with you more. Common sense is not that common, unfortunately. But I'm really not sure about the discussion with a voter about democracy. I was thinking you were going to say a 5-minute discussion with a politician would confuse everybody completely about democracy. So yeah, it is interesting, but and I think what Nazipa was touching on for me is absolutely one of the foundations of what we talk about here in wisdoms is, you know, it's not necessarily the knowledge or the apparent intellect you have, it's how you apply that. So it's the application of knowledge that really shows, for me, intelligence. I mean, to have knowledge is simply you've shown the ability to learn. So you can learn information, but can you apply it? And once you've actually taken that learned information, you've turned it into some form of practical application. That for me is intelligence, and it doesn't really matter how you've learned that information, whether it's in the bush or whether it's in the classroom. Doesn't make any difference. So yeah, those are my brief thoughts on intelligence. And so Lee, I think back over to you to wrap up for the morning and suggest where we might find ourselves tomorrow.
Well, thanks everyone. Such great input, and yeah, it's and it feeds into what I'd like us to think about tomorrow. And picking up from what Edward was saying is what is the value of group think versus individual think, and you know and I think we can actually have some really good discussions around the value of being different to the group, how a group can actually create something separate and different and amazing compared to what an individual can come up with, versus a kind of crowd mentality or a committee type intelligence. So let's talk tomorrow around individual and group think, and pros and cons for both. So I'd love to get your input on that. So thanks everyone.
Great, thanks Lee. So everybody go and be an individual and think about the group, and we'll see how that turns out tomorrow morning. So have a fantastic day further, and we'll see you tomorrow. Cheers now.